Well, I'm going to start off with saying that I'm Ian Horvath and we have John Furshbeck on the camera. Today is February the 4th. We are at the home of Robert Clarke on Liberty Road, just near Eldersburg. And Mr. Clarke, would like to have you tell us a little bit about your life. Let's start with where were you born?
Okay, I was born over on Route 32 at the farm at Gamber, where the Gamber Fire Company is now, and it was belonged to my grandfather's father's people.
And their name?
Their name was George B. Knox, and the prior owner was his father, Lewis Henry Knox. And the prior of them was the Jacobs family.
So that farm was in the family a long time.
Yeah, it was in from I guess the late, early 1800s, right up until most of it, my brother sold the remainder of it off just about a year ago. So until 2008. So that was and so then my mother married a fellow named Marvin Clarke from Oakland, and they lived on the farm over there. My father worked in Baltimore as an accountant, and he became sick and died over there in 1932, and I was born over there in 1931, and my mother then remarried Harvey Houck here in 1939. I moved here in 1939, and I've worked here up till now, so until this time.
Did you live on the farm very long yourself?
Down here, I lived on the farm from 1939 until 1980. We built this house here for my mother, Gladys Houck. And then when my mother died, my wife and I lived down in Oakland for a couple of years, and mother passed away. Then she and I moved here into this house in 1985. So.
How about the farm over at Gamber? Did you visit there very much?
Yeah, we owned the farm. We bought it and we worked at the farm over there up until about 10 years ago. And my nephew took it over, and then he decided not to farm anymore, and then we rented it out to Lippy Brothers up at Hampstead. And then we sold part for subdivision, and then we sold the remainder to another fellow just a few years ago. So that's...
The house over there, do you have any idea when that house was built?
The first part of the house was a log house. About the first third of it was a log house, and I don't know when that was built, but my grandfather always said that when they moved there, he was 2 years old, and his father had gotten 125 acres on the front as a wedding present, and then they bought another 100 acres on the back part of the farm, but they moved there in 1865, I guess. The Battle of Gettysburg was going on, and he said his mother held him in his arms in the front lawn, and they could hear the cannons of Gettysburg. And then over the years after that, I think his father put the extension onto the house, and the house is about 80 feet long, and it's about, I guess, about 40 feet wide with his extension on the back. And they lived there up until, my grandfather lived there until 1948 when he moved in here with us, and he died in 1955. And we farmed the land up until, as I say, just about 10 years ago. And it's...
And what kind of crops did you raise?
We raised corn and wheat and barley, and then we kept all our dairy heifers over there. Mm-hmm. Had a big meadow over there, was fenced in, and we kept about 25 or 30 dairy heifers over there, and as they came fresh, then we moved them over here. But we kept dairy heifers over there for, I guess, 30 years at least, and it's till we went out of the dairy business in 1975, and of course we sold what we had over there then.
Mm-hmm. What kind of outbuildings did you have over there?
There was 2 barns. There's a rather large barn, and there's another barn a short ways away from it that was about the same size, and then there was another building there that we kept our corn in, and There was another building there we kept the machinery in. And of course the house, and then there was a log storage house behind it. And then I think there was another large chicken house down over the hill.
Smokehouse?
Yeah, there's a smokehouse there too.
Do you remember when they didn't have electricity over there?
It came in 1926. My brother was born in 1926. And he was born in January, and that January, or February, they brought electricity into the farm when that early spring. And the spring of 1926 is when they brought electricity into the property there.
So then they got some modern conveniences.
Yeah, and they went and got all the modern conveniences in, like, you know, the water pump and everything else that they needed.
How about the cook stove? Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember
having the cook stove?
I remember the cook stove there. That was there up until my grandfather moved out in 1948. And I remember that as a little boy, my grandmother, mother and aunt, they all cooked very nice meals there. Of course, there was Christmas dinner and all the holiday dinners there. And of course, they cooked for the ministers down at church, down at the Mount Pleasant Church on some Sundays. But I remember all those old things that were there.
I bet the kids had lots of chores.
Yeah, we all did.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Had to get the wood in.
That's right. Do it all. We had to mow the lawn. My brother and my cousin Baldwin, between my brother and I in age, my mother's sister's son, they came up and stayed all summer. And one of the chores we had to do was mow the lawn. Of course, we had push lawn mowers, and sometimes we get a little behind, and my grandfather and uncle would say, if you don't get that lawn mowed, you're going to have to get out and cut it with the scissors. So, but anyway, we then of course got to it, and we had the other odds and ends to help with as boys. We helped with whatever we were able to do, is help with the harvesting over there and those kind of things. So
you remember making hay and getting in the corn.
Right, and all that went with it, and cleaning out the stables over there. And of course, we had a few horses and a couple of mules, but that was, they were just there to help out with anything they needed. We always had a tractor over there from the time I can remember.
How old were you when you started to drive the tractor?
About 7 years old. Yeah, I started when I was about 7 years old, and I helped over there. They helped out when they needed me, which they supervised what I was doing. Okay. But had me on the tractor to guide around the field to help pick up the hay and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. But it was, I guess, about 7 years old when they put me out there.
Where did you go to school? I
started school over in Gamber, downtown, in the old school there. I think there's an apartment building there now. There's two portables right beside of it on the left. And I was the first and second, third and fourth, and I went through the first two grades down there in 1939, and I moved here and started to Sykesville School in 1939, September 39, and of course graduated down here.
Right.
And I didn't go on to college full time. I went to part time at some of the colleges for different things, but I stayed here and worked instead of during the day, and of course it was either that or you had to go to college full time, so I went at night for different things.
You remember going to Cleese Mill with your father?
I do, yeah. My grandfather.
Or grandfather.
Grandfather would go over there and take the wheat over there to have it processed into flour, and then he and I would ride over on with two horses in a wagon they put the barrels of flour on and brought them back over to the farmhouse. And that was.
Where did you go to the store? Where did you get things like that?
The store down in Gamber, just prior to going into where the school is, where the old school is. A fellow named Bonner, Ed Bonner, owned the store there, and that's where we all did our business. Another store down at the intersection of 91 and 32, Mr. Clint Shipley owned it, but we didn't get down there very much. We did our business up at Mr. Bonner's store there.
The one down at 91 was later Ford's store?
Yeah, Ford bought it from...
The other one was probably Barnes' store later on.
Yeah, Barnes,
yeah. What, were there other businesses in Gamber at that time?
Yeah, there was another fellow had auto repair shop down to the lower end of town on the right-hand side. And I can't think of his name offhand. I do know it, but I can't think of it. But anyway, that's where they got all the auto repair work done down there. He was good at what he did, and he did service the vehicles, did the oil changes and all those kind of things, the tires and the brakes and all those kind of things.
Do you remember the little black church that was further down there?
I just remember being there, yeah. Just remember
There's still the cemetery.
Yeah, the cemetery. I remember, in fact, I even remember seeing a burial there at one time, a long time ago. But I remember the church being there for what it was. But then, of course, the graveyard at one time was all cleaned up and it was all, you know, in very good shape. But it's as it is today. Yeah.
Now the farm over here, closer to your home, you're talking about the one down over the hill.
Here, yes, that's one.
And when did your family acquire that farm?
I think my stepfather came here in 1919.
Okay.
He grew up at Winfield on a farm up there, and he married and rented another farm nearby. And then when this came up for sale, he came back and bought it at public sale and moved here in 1919.
About how old is that house?
That house was a log cabin. Part of it's a log cabin on the west end, and then I think a people named Hughes, Harry Hughes, I believe, they bought the farm at some time, and they put the extension onto it. I don't know what year, but it had to have been back, probably way back in the 1915 or something like that. And Mr. Hughes and his family are all buried down at Western Freedom Church.
And there are a number of outbuildings down there. Are they early outbuildings or things that have been added on?
Well, they've been added on. There's only one outbuilding that's left there is the old meat house. And the other ones are been built in recent years. The barn burned in 1926 or 27, and that was built then. And then we built, I think it was a garage was built sometime around 1930, and then the other buildings were built. One was built in 1942, a big machine shed was built in 1942, and I think there's another building house and heifers and so on, and that was built probably around 1930, so I understand.
Did you ship milk from over here?
Yeah, we did. Yep, we shipped milk. Stepfather came here with dairy cows here when he came here, and we stayed in the dairy business until 1975.
It changed a lot during those years.
Yep, quite a bit. So we went from, we had what they call pail type milkers were carried from down the aisle in between each cow, and then in early 60s we put what we call a glass pipeline milker around the perimeter of the barn, and which eliminated all the carrying of the milk. All you did is attach the milkers to the cows, and the lines took it right up into the glass line and pumped it right over into the dairy house, into the big tank. So that eliminated a lot of labor, a lot of work, and actually increased our production too by doing as it did.
What kind of cows did you?
They're all Holstein.
All Holstein.
All registered. Well, they were registered all purebred, but some were registered, but most of them were all purebred Holstein. But we only had a few registered cows. We didn't really deal with the registered animals, since we didn't really have to, but we used all, like I say, all purebred stock.
So the work was primarily done by family members?
Yes, we had some outside help. We had a fellow that lived over on the farm over on 97, and they helped. We had a couple different people lived over there, and they helped with the milking. But my stepfather, my brother, and myself, and another man, his wife lived just behind me in the brother's house, just behind here, and they helped with the work also.
Okay, what about Sykesville? You alluded to the fact that you've lived over here for a good number of years. Which churches have you been involved with since you've lived over here?
Well, I started down here with Wesley Chapel in started in 1940s, spring of 1940, and I stayed there until they merged in the 42 or something like that, and then we moved over to Freedom Church, and was there until we built the new facility in 1991. And I was chairman of the building committee when they built that new facility there in 91. and I've been there ever since. So actually I've been here since 1940, what's about 68, coming up 69 years, membership down there.
The little Wesley Freedom Chapel hasn't changed a whole lot.
No, it hasn't changed hardly any at all. It just, except maybe a few trees have been added and some taken down, those kind of things, but the chapel itself hasn't changed any at all. We've tried to maintain it. In fact, we just had some work done on the doors, the side doors and the front doors last week to bring them up to maintenance, but it's been some inside work done, and we've tried to maintain it as best we can.
Do you know anything about the history of that little chapel?
Yeah, I can tell you from the beginning, there was a little log schoolhouse back Johnsville Road, a short ways behind the church, where Carrion Drive is now, and it was called Antioch School. It was a little, that's where they started their services in early 1800s. And so they then, in 1821, they bought an acre of land from the Welch family that owned the farm where the church is and behind it. And they then built that church and started in 1822. And that's when the first church was first built. And a fellow named John Elder and some of the others there. There's about 5 of them. I don't know the names right offhand, but it's in the history here. And they established that church there, and the church continued up until 1940. What was it? 42, I think, when they merged. All the churches merged, and then it was closed, and we moved over to Freedom Church, and we're there until the new church was built in 1991. And of course, the Freedom Church is used by the youth and the Boy Scouts and some other people, but and then we have a contemporary worship service there on Sunday for the youth and whoever. But,
do you remember any other little buildings that were there around Freedom?
yeah, there was one on Johnsville Road and Liberty Road. It's on the east side. It's on the east side. There was a little building there, a lodge hall.
A lodge hall.
Lodge hall it's called. I think I have a picture, short drawing of it there. I have the number, and there were a number of people there. My great grandfather and his father helped to establish that log house, the lodge house there, and it continued up until I remember being there when I moved here. It was kind of like a 2-story clapboard building there, and it was torn down, I guess, probably in the middle 40s, I would imagine. But then there were other people. Henry Kohler across the way here, he is a member of the lodge. I think he, as a boy, also went to that lodge building, went to the lodge in the lodge building there. But getting back to Freedom Church, my great-grandfather, pictured here, he was chairman of the building committee that built that church. His name was Robert Rice Clarke, and I was chairman of the building committee that built the Wesley Freedom Church in 1909. My name is Robert Rhodes Clarke, so it's kind of a coincidence there that they tied in like that, but that's the way it was.
Well, those deep family connections are important.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. They were very active in building. I think he and his father, as I said, they built that lodge hall down there too.
How about some of the other buildings there in Freedom? Was there ever a little store or other businesses
Yeah,
there?
in Freedom, there was a store across the road owned by Mr. Linton. Prior to that, I don't know who it was, but I think that's where the post office was, and a general store there. And I remember there's a general store there when I didn't use it very much. We knew the people lived there, Mr. Linton and so on.
There was a school there too, wasn't there?
Right across the road from it, there was a school there. And my great-grandfather, Thomas Brown, was the first full-time minister at Freedom Church, and he was transferred from Cumberland to the building right above the school, which was the house there that they lived in. And my grandmother said she was 4 years old when they transferred down here, and her mother taught school there in the little schoolhouse there.
Oh my goodness. And
her father was first full-time minister there. And when the church was built, I guess in 1969 is the cornerstone. It took a few years before it was completed, and then he was, there's apparently some part-time ministers, and he was first full-time minister there, or whatever year that was.
You're going to tell us about some of these little artifacts that you've accumulated.
Yeah, okay, I can start with the church there, and then we could go with that, or
No, let's start with the church
Okay.
since we were just talking about
well, this, I don't know, I'm getting these people lined up as to who they are, but that was taken in I just found out the other day, it was taken in 1922. I'm sorry, 1820, no, let's go back, I'm sorry, start again at 1922, that was,
So this was taken when the church was 100 years old?
yes, that's right. And I don't know the people there, but I have a lady here that's done the history on them, and she was supposed to get back to me last night, and I didn't. She didn't call me, I tried to call her, and she was gone. But anyway, those are, they're from they had a conference, regional conference meeting at the time they did the 1922 service down here. And those are people from out of the state and out of the, but they're members of the conference.
So they were the dignitaries apparently attending that program.
Right,
that day.
yeah.
Okay. Now this gentleman.
Okay, I can give you a little bit more of this. Well,
Okay.
either way, however you want to do it.
Just a minute.
It's this is my great grandfather. He and his father came here from Scotland, and his name is Robert Rice Clarke. And he came here from Scotland. They worked in the copper mines here in Sykesville, and then they established residence here. And I don't know what else they did, but they also he had a farm over here on March Road, where Liberty Pioneer Reservoir is now. I remember the farm and the old house and barn there, but he had 69 acres there that they had established there, and that's where he died, over there on that farm. Where his father died, I don't know, but they're all buried down in Springfield Church.
Okay.
And his family and his father and so on. But Frank Clarke was a relative, and he lived up here, grew up at the intersection of 97 and 26. And he did all the history on these things. And of course, some of the other Clarke family has done that too.
Right. Yes.
So, let's see, that's about all I have on that right now, but if we get back to
Yeah, we're going to move down toward Eldersburg a little bit because you have some photographs and newspaper articles about that area.
right, that's right. We can start off with this, if you want to, by saying that the center picture here is the big old house that was established by the Elder family, and Allen Elder built that house. I think it says on here 1752, I believe. And
that was known as the Lawson home, is that right?
yes, that's right, yeah. And Dr. Lawson from Atlanta, Georgia, moved here in 1935, and he established a residence there and a doctor or medical practice there. And
Do you remember him?
Oh yeah, he was my doctor until he died, until he passed away. Couldn't up until the middle 50s, I guess.
He had an office right there in the house.
In the house, yeah. They had refurbished the house and so on, and his practice there. And he had a big practice because he and there was only one other doctor in the area. Was down in Sykesville, and he and the one in Sykesville were the only few doctors in the whole area. And they, of course, there weren't as many people, but there were people here that needed medical attention, and
Absolutely.
so really he did. And the next picture up is the one that's it's a large house down on Ridge Road. It's off of Ridge Road before you get over to Marriottsville Road. It's on the right-hand side. There's a big farm down there. One of our ministers lived in the house there, and so we'd go down there quite often, and my mother would go down to meetings down there, and I'd take her down, we'd go in the house and so on. And that was it was a beautiful big old home on the inside too.
And that house is still there.
As far as I know, yeah. I don't
But the
think
barn's
it's
gone.
as I assume. I haven't been down there for a long time.
Is that commonly known as the Moses Brown house?
Yes, I think that's the Moses Brown house.
Okay. This looks like the back of the house,
It could be, but it looked. I thought it was more. No, I'm not sure either. I'm not certain, but I thought a lot like the front of the house, but maybe it isn't.
Well, I could be wrong too.
Yeah, okay. I haven't been in it for a long time, I just
How
don't.
about, there's a picture in this group of Branton too. Do you remember that house?
Oh, that's the big old, it's a big old Jefferson home down on 32, I guess.
Down at Chevette's Corner? That would be this one.
No, that's not down Chevette's Corner, that's down the Brent Minutes. I think that's down here on the, I'm thinking, let me see where that is. I'm thinking that was down on, the one down here on March Road, isn't it?
No, I
Is
think
that the
that
one?
was down by Liberty Road and near the bridge.
Oh, is it?
But
Okay.
there's a couple of other pictures here too that,
This,
yeah, I'm not sure where this home was. It says the Freedom
Yeah.
Garden.
yeah, that's down, you go down Johnsville Road and past the church to the intersection, and you go short ways, and there's the first road that makes a left-hand turn. There's a small pond down to the left, if you remember that, or can see that, that's where that is, in there. People named Offuttville. I can't think of the name of the people that owned it, but there was a man and his wife there. He was a salesman, I think he was a liquor salesman, but anyway, they donated all the land where Freedom Wesley Chapel is today, right up to the cemetery. They owned all that property right up to the cemetery, and they donated that land to the church. And when they built the first part in 72 down there, and then they had enough land there left to build the new church in 1991. Now that's where that is.
Did the Adams live here?
Adams, that's who that was. Yeah, that was Adams. That's his name, Adams. That's
That's
right.
back sort of behind, over the hill from Holy Trinity Cemetery. Do you remember Holy Trinity Cemetery?
Oh yeah, yes.
You remember the little chapel?
That was there, yeah. On just basically, yeah.
Yeah, it was probably not much to it when you were.
No,
in
I
this
could just
area.
always, there was the front walls, the walls where that roof was gone, which all the windows and doors were gone, but it was there until just a few years after I moved over here. But I didn't remember much about it other than just the history I've read about it.
How about the rest of Eldersburg? I'm sure it looked quite a lot different than it does today.
It does. There was just the service station on the corner there, owned by the Gardeners when I came here. There was a blacksmith shop just directly on the hill behind it, owned by Mr. Gilbert Randall. He did all the repair work and shoot horses, and I came up here and shoot horses from a stepfather's company he had, and all the others around, and did repair work on equipment. And then there was a garage right across the road from it where the new drugstore is. There were some Walgreens there, and there was a car dealership there. I've forgotten who the guy was, did repair work, and then a fellow named Molnix bought it and had it for a few years, and then he went down, just on down the road, a short ways on the right, and built a big two-story garage there, and he had a Chevrolet dealership there for quite a few years until he died, and then a couple other dealers had purchased it after that. But then on the other side of the road was all farmland. Mr. Bavard had several hundred acres there. In fact, we farmed it for the last years it was farmed.
Oh, really?
And we farmed it, I guess, for probably 10 years, I guess. There's 125 acres there that were rented from whoever owned it.
Do you ever remember a graveyard being there?
No, I don't.
No. How about an orchard? There was an orchard
Yeah,
there.
orchard on the upper side of the road, behind where, on the old upper side of the 32,
As you
on the
came up.
left. Yeah, and I think Mr. Bavard sold all his apples there, and produce went to Springfield Hospital. And so then, of course, further on out, it was Strawbridge Home, and then the farms on the right and so on. But it was quite different what it is today.
How about do you remember the houses that were so close to the road down there at Eldersburg, if you were coming from Baltimore as you're going west?
On the right.
Yes.
Yeah, there was a little general store there at one time too. A guy had a store there for a short time in one of the houses, but those houses we had, actually after he closed his store, we had a JC's organization there. We met in that building for a number of years. And till then, it was torn down, I think, and moved. No, it burned down. It caught fire and burned. And so we lost our JC memorabilia there.
Oh my goodness.
And all our awards we'd gotten and so on. So anyway, then we continued with after Mr. Lyons had a restaurant directly across the road in the south corner of 32 and 26, and we all, of course, went there for meals and so on occasionally, and when he moved out and was bought, we then used that building for a short time as our JC's meeting place until the JC organization terminated. But it was, and then on down the road, there was farmland on the right-hand side, down 32, for quite a ways down. Of course, Springfield Hospital, you get into Springfield Hospital's ownership down there, but that's pretty well.
You graduated from high school in Sykesville. Do you remember spending a lot of time in Sykesville?
We go down on every Saturday night went to the movies, and we bought our groceries down there from Mr. Harrison, owned the food store down there. Mr. Herring, DeFreeze Herring, had the hardware store. Of course, we dealt down there quite a few things. We needed hardware parts, any kind of hardware, anything. We always went down there and bought from him for whatever.
How about the mill down there, Herring's Mill? Was that operating ever?
Yeah, I remember that. They used that in the first few years I was over here. That was in operation. And that, I don't know when that terminated, probably in the middle 40s, I guess, probably. I mean, middle 40s, early 50, I guess. But we always dealt with whatever we wanted. We went to Sykesville, went to the barber shop, we went to the movies, got our groceries down there, our medical supplies, and anything we wanted down there. So
as a teenager, that was the place to go.
Really, that's right. I didn't go to church down. I was only in the church down there one time to a wedding, but which were very much attached to Freedom Church up here, which is closest, and we knew all the people that went there. But that's about, I guess, it for Sykesville. What else can we come up with?
Well, let's see. Anything else about Eldersburg or about farming that you'd kind of like to think about a little bit?
Other than the fact we farmed that, Mr. Bavard's farm for a number of years, and we grew corn and soybeans, a very productive farm down there. It was laid down in the lower area. Of course, Mr. Bavard had kept the fertility rate up on it with fertilizer and manure from these cattle down there and so on. It was very productive, did very well.
I've heard that there are a lot of Indian artifacts found down there from time to time. Is that true?
Yes, it is. Well, we didn't find any, but I understand Mr. Bavard, and they dug up quite a few artifacts down to about where, just below Home Depot, down in the old valley there. And I understand they got about 6 bushel baskets full of Indian artifacts, arrowheads and so on. And what I understand, they're up in the Historical Society up in Westminster now.
Okay.
And
The Bavard house was an early house. Do you remember being in it?
Yes, I did. I was in there quite a few times, and my mother and her family were very friendly with the Bavards. She used to come over here as a little girl. And then, of course, I knew the family, Bavard family, and the Delaney boys that were Mr. Bavard's grandchildren and his daughter's sons. We all, of course, we go down there a lot of times after church and visit Mr. Bavard when he couldn't come to church anymore. But I got down there quite often.
It was a big house.
It was a big house. It was very, very nice inside. Of course, an older house, but it was very nice. He had it furnished very nice on the inside.
And I think there were a lot of outbuildings at one point.
Yeah, I just don't recall the outbuildings other than just the farm needs, whatever the farm needs. Probably an outhouse down, a meat house or log house down there for their, their, whatever the slaughter of their animals and so on. And I don't recall all the buildings down there.
There was a little stone building up close to 32. Maybe it wasn't so small, but there was, to fairly recent years, there was a stone building up there.
Could have been. I guess it was, but I don't remember it really. I don't recall it.
The road came into the house a bit differently than the roads do today.
Yes, it did. It went out 32 a short ways. I guess several hundred yards, and then a right-hand turn down through the valley down to the house.
Right, right.
And then they, of course, there was, at one time in later years, they had a building there that they processed, called a pea viner up there.
Peon, yeah.
And they processed the peas from around the community there.
Do you remember processing peas?
I do, we didn't do any of it.
You did?
No, we
Did you
didn't.
ever go by after they had processed peas?
Not here, not down here. We did. We used to go to B.F. Shriver Company in Westminster
Uh-huh.
and get theirs
It
up
was,
there.
pretty potent odors, if I remember correctly, when they did the peas.
Yeah, it was, they get stale, things get stale pretty quick.
Yeah, yeah. What about some of the other farms? Like you're going west on Liberty Road, the Parish farm was supposed to have been a very early house. Do you remember that one?
Yes, I do. It was, Mr. Parrish moved there. It was his house, or when I moved here, the house wasn't in real good shape, but I understand Mr. Parrish's son renovated the house, and the buildings were there, and I think he added a couple more buildings there and so on. And they had a very nice place there at one time. A fellow named Wilmer Huff, he grew up over at the farm in Gambury. He married a lady from up the road here, and they moved there, and they were the ones that farmed the farm for quite a few years, and his son then took it over until they sold the farm.
Fairly recent years, yeah. Then as you go down past Wesley Freedom, there was another farm that's that big old house that's up back on the right. I'm not sure who owned that
After
one.
we passed Wesley Freedom, going down the road.
That's okay.
Well, I can't remember that right
Do you
off.
remember any of the Lintons, the Linton farm?
Yes, Linton Farm, back on Linton Road, yes. Yeah, we were.
That was a big farm too, I
It was
understand.
rather large back there too, yes. We went back, in fact, we farmed it for a few years back there. And we farmed it, I guess, for probably 5 years. And then the neighbor just behind us, Mr. Bollinger, they farm it right now. They're the ones that are farming it right now. But it's never been sold, but I think there's only, let's see, one of the Linton children living, and she lives in the house down right below where the old general store was in Freedom. She has a brick house there, and she's the only heir to the property. So she has a son, and now I think she has some brothers, and one of those brothers had 2 children. But beyond that, I don't know much about the Linton family. So.
Any other artifacts that you have here that you
Thank you.
kind of wanted to share with us?
Did we get a little picture of this, just as a drawing as to what it might be?
Okay.
If you want to do it, it's Liberty Road and where the old Freedom Lodge Hall was.
Okay. To my knowledge, there's no picture of that building.
Not that I know of, no, there isn't that I know of. I can remember the building itself being there. But that's, I don't know of any photograph or anybody that has anything. Unless Henry Kohler over here might have something, but I don't know. He'd be the only other person that I know that's living would have any connection with it today. So, but
How about White Rock Road? Do you remember going back that road at all?
yes, I traveled back that quite often. We went back
Or was
to,
it dirt road?
yes, it was a dirt road and muddy road in spring and summer.
Heard that before.
Really quite a road back there. But
Where did
anyway,
it get its name?
that I don't know. I don't know where that came from. But
There are some white rocks scattered here and there, but not enough to make me convinced that's where it got its name. I just wondered.
I don't know. I don't know where it came from. The the colored church back there. That's White Rock Church, but I don't know the origin of it. But it's. But I went back there quite often. We went back and visited the Bennett family that lived back. The second farm back. The first farm back was, first was Bollinger's on the right, and then prior to that, someone else owned that. And then the next farm back was the Etzler farm, and my mother was very friendly, my stepfather was friendly with the Etzlers back there quite often. And then we went back to the Bennett farm. Knew all the family back there.
Near Streaker Road.
Yes, and we was back there quite a lot.
And you remember the little, the White Rock Church, and how about the little black schoolhouse that was back there? I think that's a residence now.
Yeah, right on the corner. So
Yes.
right on the corner on the left-hand
Yes.
side there at Streaker and White Rock.
Uh-huh.
On the left-hand side, yeah. And
Yeah.
then the people just below that, Mr. Marion Proof owned the farm right adjacent to or behind that
Uh-huh, yeah, I know which
school.
one.
My mother, and because Mr. and Mrs. Proof went to Freedom Church, and we all became very friendly and knew one another pretty well.
I would imagine that most of the people in the community farmed, or lots of people worked at Springfield, at least part of the time.
Yeah, that's where the most of them worked, did really. I guess it's just either they farmed or they worked at Springfield, and that was about the major employment around the area. Like when we came from school on the school bus, we didn't go around 32 very seldom. We went down through Springfield Hospital and all around. Of course, we saw everything that went on down there, all the people around on the lawns. And
Lots of people there then.
3,250 people they had at one time.
And many of them stayed a long time.
Yep, that's right.
And lots of local people worked there.
That's right. A lot of employment in from all over the country. So I knew some people that I know today, the relatives today came up from South Carolina and so on. That Hawkins family that came here from down Asheville, North Carolina. And they were employed up here and they stayed here. Some of course went into other employment. And I know some of the fellows, some of the relatives of those descendants of those ones that are here now. One lives in Westminster, one lives just on the Etzler farm back here. And a few of them around, but there's a lot of employment from people that came here for employment, and there was a big demand for it.
We've talked a little bit about a lot of the communities. How about Barrett? It had a little store and a school too, I think.
Yeah, the school over there, I don't know too much about the school, but there's a small church over there.
Right.
There's a store right on the left there. Mr. Brandenburg, when I moved here, owned a store over there. We go over there occasionally to get something for in the area. But of course, all that was farmland around the area over there.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
All out through there was all the Rash family out there. They owned a big farm out there, and of course there was on down on the other side there was I can't think of the gentleman's name who owned the farm down on the other side of the road, but it was all farmland all up through there, and all the way up through the whole country there was all farmland.
Okay.
Let's see, is there anything else that I can come up with or can't think of?
Well, we sort of toured around the area. I think you've shown us most of the artifacts that you had. You do have this wonderful ledger that you were telling us a little bit about.
I can open it up here and get something started. It's a shame that they covered over all his writing, and most of his writing here. Why they did it, I don't know for what.
Covered over with newspaper articles
Yep,
of
that's
yours.
what they are. But this is some of my great-grandfather Thomas Brown. That's his. He was a circuit rider. Came up out of Virginia, and he rode all through the area up around, I guess, the upper part of Virginia and up into western Maryland, and that's how I think he got established at Cumberland. And then when they requested he move down here, then he came here. And but this is his circuit rider.
It's like a diary.
It's a diary or whatever. It's a daily thing that he kept.
A record of his
Yeah.
travels.
And it goes back to I don't know the exact year when it started, but some of it got covered up. It's way back in the in the 1800s when he went around over the area, and so. But he was here for a number of years. I don't know where he was buried. I can never be able to find his burial where he was buried. But his daughter, he only had one daughter, and she married my grandfather, Theodore Clarke, and they moved to a farm down on Oakland Road. They built a nice farmhouse down there. It's still there. It's all in nice shape, but it was sold for development after they died. They had 2 children. One was my father. One was another son named Brown Clarke, and he farmed for a while, but he didn't do very well with what he did. So he drank a little too much and got into problems. So,
those problems persist in every generation.
Yep,
And young people
true.
didn't have a lot of choices. So.
That's right. So that's covers that. I don't know what he had down. He had about, I guess, about 125 acres, I guess, and then he had dairy cows there too. They milked dairy cows there too. Not many. I don't know how many they had.
Did you ship to a particular dairy?
Did we?
Yeah.
Yeah, we Cloverland Dairy in
Okay.
Baltimore, and my stepfather's sister, her husband and his brother were the owners of Cloverland Dairy.
Oh.
So we got down there quite often, and of course we had connections with them there in Baltimore. We go down to their house. They lived down Liberty Road here just before you cross the Baltimore County line, Baltimore City, Baltimore County line, and we got to go down to the dairy every now and then, and we had a picnic up here or something. They'd come up and bring a great big container of homemade ice cream from cream they got out of the dairy, you know, it couldn't be any nicer. And so, but they came up quite often. But then later years when we shipped then to Coons Dairy in Westminster.
Okay.
And that was the later years when we, in last years we shipped milk. I guess the last 10 years probably we shipped milk.
Okay.
We got into the dairy, Maryland Dairy Cooperative, which had a building down here on Liberty Road, and they dispersed the milk to different areas, and we were the ones that were dispersed to Coons and Westminster. So,
By that time, they had the big trucks and.
yeah, they had the big tank trucks.
Right. Right.
That carried it. Probably in, I'd say around 1955, we were required to put a tank in. I went from milk can to a tank. And
Bet
then,
you've lifted a lot of milk cans.
yeah, we did. That was the job. We didn't have to roam from the barn over to the dairy house, which wasn't too far away. It's about 50 feet away, and then put them up on a platform, and then stood on the platform and put the milk can down into a big tank of water,
Keep them cool.
keep them cold, and till the next day. And when they picked them up in the morning, and then in 1955 they required we all have bulk tanks, which made it not nicer, and I think the milk was kept a lot cleaner and everything else.
Did you ever have milk returned because of the garlic or something?
Once or twice. Once or twice we got some cans back,
Always
but we had to be very careful to
It's a
turn the
spring
cows
thing,
out. That's
yeah.
right, in the spring of the year you had to turn the cows out. And we always made sure that we turned them out for a short time in the morning and got them back into the fenced-in lot and fed them alfalfa hay
Right.
until they were ready to milk in the evening. Then we turn them out at night, and they go pretty much all night after they got the meadows trimmed down.
Right.
So they got the garlic and the grass and so on down to a point it was just
Didn't affect the
didn't
milk.
affect them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course we fed them a lot of hay too,
Right.
alfalfa hay, and that helped offset, I guess, some of the problems.
Right.
But that was a problem, something you really had to be careful. Only about once or twice we got any milk back. But I had to be very careful. My stepfather was very sensitive about any, condition of his milk, and if it was clean or if the things had to be just right, and he watched those kind of things because it cost you money if you lost that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
He just couldn't afford to do that.
Well, I think you've answered a lot of questions and given us a lot of information, Mr. Clarke. Thank you very much.
All right, well, I'm certainly more than glad to do it. I think everything I've told you is just about what I've known and come in contact with over the years.
Okay.
And one other thing in the area, I might say that I don't know what year, I do know what year too, is 1730, that this area was all, came from a land grant from, I guess, England, I assume, or Germany, won probably to the Dorsey family.
Yeah.
Give them 3,300 acres in here. And they, one of the Dorsey grandsons has been doing, I haven't talked to him for a while, he's been doing some research on the farms and their what they had gotten. And he told me that 1730 is when they got their land grant and they got 3,300 acres here.
Hard to imagine.
Yep. They and the Shipleys too, on the other side of the road, up 97, I don't know how many acres they got, but they had quite a big operation too. And I was just back to the old Shipley farm off of Nicodemus Road where the house and the barn is not so long ago. But they had quite a bit of land too to the north.
They were some of the really early settlers.
Yep. The Shipleys and the
Shipleys, the
Dorseys,
the
and
Elders, of course.
Yep. And there was another family down the road, what was it? They got quite a bit of land too, down around the reservoir. What was their names down there? I can't think of that name, but the house, I don't know, I just can't think, I don't remember.
Snowden.
I guess that's who it was, yeah.
Okay, and of course, the Brandenburgs came early.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's about the only thing I can.
It is an
Had
interesting
to.
area.
It is, yeah, it's a lot of history around the area.
Yeah.
It's something that's, I've taken a lot of interest in it over the years and try to record it and keep it in mind what I've come in contact with and pictures and all those kind of things. And I've tried to do a lot.
We do appreciate your sharing with us.
Well,
Thank you very
more than
much.
glad to do it. I'm glad if it worked out all right for you. I hope I told things right.
I think you did. Great job. Great job.